He almost threw it back into the mud because it looked like nothing. Just a few dull, buttery flecks clinging to black sand at the bottom of his scoop. The lake was quiet in that early spring way, still cold enough to sting your fingers, still empty enough that every sound felt too loud. The metal detector's faint chirp, the shovel biting into wet gravel, the water lapping against the bank. Miles Carter, 47, single dad, worked at Shoreline like a man trying to solve a problem by sheer repetition. He wasn't out there to get rich. He was out there because hunting for signals gave his brain a break from everything else. Alimony math, teenage mood swings, and the constant pressure of being the only adult in the house. Miles had been fixing up small things for years, patching drywall, repainting rooms, flipping cheap furniture, because his hands still believed in effort even when his bank account didn't. Metal detecting was his one luxury hobby, the cheapest form of hope he could afford. Most days he found bottle caps, fishing sinkers, a rusted pocket knife, and enough pull tabs to make him swear he'd quit. That morning was supposed to be the same. He had even told himself he'd leave after one last pass along the Reed line, because his daughter needed a ride later and the day was already slipping away. Then his detector sang a clean tone that didn't match trash, and he dug down into the saturated gravel until his shovel hit something dense. At first he thought it was another smooth stone. When he rinsed it in the lake water, a yellow glint flashed and vanished like a prank. He scraped gently with his thumb and saw more of it. Thin veins in a pale rock, tiny metallic flakes that didn't look painted on, embedded like the earth had stitched them there. His stomach tightened with that stupid, impossible thought, gold. He hated the thought because it felt childish, like believing in a lottery ticket. He pocketed the smallest piece anyway, more to prove himself wrong later than to prove himself right. By afternoon, he tried a different pawn shop across town, the kind with loud signs and fast talk, just to get the idea out of his head. The guy behind the counter barely looked up. He rubbed the fragment between his fingers, shrugged, and said it was probably brass and quartz, and offered Miles a number that felt like an insult. Enough for groceries, not enough to matter. Miles walked out with his jaw clenched, not because he expected a fortune, but because the man hadn't even tested it. He dismissed it the way people dismiss single dads with tired eyes. Quick, easy, convenient. So Miles drove to the pawn shop people quietly trusted, the one run by the brother and sister pair who didn't rush, didn't perform, and didn't smell desperation like opportunity. He stepped inside carrying a folded paper towel like it held something fragile, and when he placed the little rock on the counter, he felt ridiculous all over again. "I know this is probably nothing," he said, forcing the words out, "but I pulled it out of a lake bed this morning. Can you tell me what it actually is?" Lila didn't smile. She just turned on the inspection light, picked up the fragment with gloved fingers, and reached for the test kit. Ray leaned in, eyes narrowing, and when the yellow flecks caught the light again, his expression shifted from polite curiosity to careful attention, because even at today's gold prices, around $5,000 an ounce, nothing didn't usually shine like that. Lila didn't do the thing the first pawn shop guy did. She didn't guess. She made the shop feel suddenly quiet by turning the inspection lamp, so the beam hit the rock at a hard angle, the way jewelers do when they want the truth to show itself. Under the light, the yellow flecks stopped looking like shiny dirt and started looking like metal that belonged there. Ray took a loop, examined the edges where the quartz broke, then set the piece on the scale and wrote the weight down without saying it out loud. Miles watched their faces like a man watching a doctor read an x-ray, trying to brace for bad news while secretly begging for one good break. They tested it in small steps. Lila dabbed a reagent on a tiny exposed edge and waited. No green stain, no weird reaction that screamed fake. Ray did a quick scratch test on the plate, careful, minimal, just enough to see how the metal behaved. Then he tapped the quartz lightly with a pick and caught a small flake that came free and sat on the plate like a crumb of sunset. "This isn't brass," Ray said quietly, and Miles felt his chest tighten. "It's native," Lila added, and said it like she was trying not to startle him. "Not jewelry, not plating, the real thing, gold and quartz." Miles blinked hard. "How much are we talking?" he asked, and hated how desperate it sounded. Ray didn't answer with a jackpot number, because that's how people get stupid. He answered with a reality check. This piece by itself, he said, depends on how much actual metal is in it. Quartz doesn't pay you. Gold does. He pointed at the size of the fragment, maybe 2 fingers wide. But if you pulled this from a lake bed, there's a decent chance it wasn't alone. Miles swallowed. That was the sentence that changed the whole day. It wasn't alone, because Miles had lied a little when he said he brought what he found. He had brought what he felt safe bringing, the tiny piece, the one that fit in a paper towel. The truth was, after he got home and rinsed his gear in the driveway, he'd gone through the rest of his finds again with shaking hands. In the bottom of his bucket, mixed with black sand, were more flecks. Not many, but enough to make him feel like the lake was quietly laughing at him for almost quitting. And in the trunk of his car, wrapped in an old sweatshirt, was something heavier he hadn't dared to show anyone yet. A rounded chunk about the size of a deck of cards, dull and muddy on the outside, with one thin yellow seam running through it like a vein. He didn't say that out loud at first. He just stood there, eyes darting, because the shop suddenly felt too public. Then Lila did something that made him trust her. She pushed the small rock back toward him instead of pulling it away. "You're not trapped here," she said. "If you want to walk out, walk out. But if you've got more, don't take it to people who don't test." Ray nodded toward the front door. "And don't tell anyone where you're digging," he added. Not like a threat, like a warning a fisherman gives another fisherman, because the fastest way to lose a good spot is to brag about it. Miles exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh. "I'm not bragging," he said. "I'm terrified." He hesitated, then leaned in and lowered his voice. "I think I have another piece," he admitted. "Bigger." Ray didn't ask him to bring it in right now. That would have been reckless. He asked the one question that mattered. "Did anyone see you?" Miles shook his head, then paused. "One guy," he said slowly. "An older man walking his dog. He looked at me like I was stealing rocks." Lila's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Then assume somebody will remember," she said. Miles took a small piece back, heart pounding with a new kind of pressure. He'd walked in hoping to be told it was nothing. Instead, he was walking out knowing it was real, and knowing that if the bigger chunk in his trunk was what he suspected, his life wasn't about to change gently. It was about to change fast. And as he reached his car in the parking lot, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. No name, no hello. Just 4 words that turned his stomach cold. "That lake isn't yours." Miles didn't answer the text. He didn't look around the parking lot like a scared animal, either. He did the one thing single dads get good at when panic shows up uninvited. He made the next decision small and smart. He drove straight home, backed his car into the driveway so nobody could casually see into the trunk, and brought the bigger rock inside wrapped in a sweatshirt like it was a newborn. He didn't call friends. He didn't post anything. He didn't even tell his daughter why he was suddenly acting like the house had ears. He just waited until she was in her room, then sat at the kitchen table staring at the rounded chunk, deck of card size, muddy, ordinary looking except for one yellow seam that ran through it like a promise. At sunrise, he took it back to Ray and Lila, and this time he didn't pretend it was probably nothing. He set it down carefully and said, "I got a message." Lila's eyes flicked up. "What message?" Miles showed them the screen. "That lake isn't yours." Ray didn't get theatrical. He just nodded once, like he'd been expecting exactly that. "Okay," he said quietly. "Then we handle this like grown-ups." They didn't talk about fights or threats. They talked about reality. Someone saw him digging. Someone guessed he found something. And now someone wanted him nervous enough to make a mistake. Lila cleaned a small section of the rock with a soft brush and water, then brought it under the inspection light. The seam brightened. Not paint, not brass. Real metal locked inside quartz. Ray took a tiny sample flake from an exposed edge. No hacking, no smashing, just enough to test purity. When the result came back, he let out a slow breath and looked at Miles with the kind of seriousness that makes your stomach flip. "It's high purity," he said. "Not jewelry scrap. Natural." Miles' mouth went dry. "So what does that mean?" Ray answered in plain language. "It means the rock is valuable because of the gold in it, and the gold is valuable because gold is expensive." He told Miles the part that mattered. You don't get paid for the whole rock. You get paid for the gold content. And the smartest move was was to sell it through channels that wouldn't cheat him or paint a target on his back. They didn't turn it into a circus. Over the next week, Ray helped Miles move it quietly and legally. No online bragging, no loud buyers, no strangers in his driveway. The pawn shop took a fair cut for brokering, testing, and handling the risk, and Miles got a payout that made his hands go numb when he saw it on paper. Not private island money, realistic life change money. Enough to clear the debts he'd been juggling, fix the car he kept praying would survive another winter, and put a real cushion in the bank so a surprise bill wouldn't turn into a crisis. When he did the math later, the number hit him hardest in one place. He could say yes to his daughter without first checking his account. The lake text never came again. The fear didn't vanish overnight, but it stopped owning him. Miles went back to that shoreline once, not to dig, but to stand there and watch the water like it had tried to teach him something. He didn't take the detector. He didn't need it. The point wasn't chasing a bigger score. The point was that he hadn't quit one pass too early, and that one stubborn morning had turned into a reset button. He didn't think life offered people like him. A month later, he walked back into the pawn shop with his daughter beside him, not carrying rocks this time, just carrying a lighter version of himself. Ray and Lila saw the change immediately. It wasn't in his clothes. It was in the way he stood. Miles thanked them without making it dramatic, because men like him don't know how to celebrate loudly. Lila simply nodded and said, "You did the hard part. You didn't panic." Ray watched father and daughter leave, then turned the open sign back toward the street, satisfied in the way pawn shop owners measure wins. One more person walked in with chaos, and walked out with a future that finally felt steady.